Cool. Hi,
Okay.
everyone. Okay. Are we good?
I'm gonna start that recording too. Okay, cool. I'll go ahead and introduce the fun things. And you, how about?
I'm good.
Awesome. Well, welcome people who are possibly watching us on YouTube, possibly right now in the Zoom meeting. And maybe you're also joining us for the replay later on sometime. And so I'm Ashley with Unglued in my house today, but in my Unglued attire for the Craft Fest weekend. And I am joined by Amanda Height from the Plainsart Museum and Honiher's print studio. Awesome. And I am just going to briefly run through some tech tips for us, and then I will hand it over to you, Amanda. How about? Sweet. So for those of you who are joining us live, whether you're on YouTube or Zoom, we are going to be doing a book binding workshop with Amanda Height, and we're really excited. This is one where if you're here today, you probably saw the supply list of things you can source, and so many of the things you probably just have at home, like a cereal box cover and unique things like this. And so if you're joining us, just stay muted when you're not talking, but please ask questions. We really encourage you when you're doing this live with us to ask questions, whether it's in the chat that we'll kind of be watching for, or you can unmute yourself too to ask. And then you're welcome to be on video or off video. We know it's sometimes weird. And so you get to choose your own adventure today by joining us. And so please feel free to turn your video on if you would like to, or to ask a specific question about a process that you're doing. And then this is recorded. You'll find the recording after this is all done over on YouTube. And so it's bit.ly/unglued YouTube. You'll find this too. And I'm really excited to be joined by Amanda. She has taught a few things with us at Unglued at our adult summer camp and other fun things like that. We've taken classes from her. She teaches over at the Plainsart Museum, and she is a print making master. And she does bookbinding and has taught this class a few times too with the Plainsart Museum, or many times. And so I'm really excited to have you here today, and I'm going to go ahead and spotlight your video. And here we go, spotlighting. Thank you so much for doing this today, and I'll just hang out in the background.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ashley. So hi, everyone. As Ashley said, I'm manager of Honiher's Ink print studio at Plainsart Museum. And the funny thing is, I also work at NDSU as well. Really love bookbinding and the idea of what making your own sketchbook can look like. Because I don't know if y'all are kind of like me, where it's like, I buy sketchbooks and I buy sketchbooks and sketchbooks, but I don't use them because they become like this precious thing. But I started to figure out that if I make my own sketchbooks, I actually use them through and through. And it's kind of a beautiful thing, whether it's a grocery list, to-do list, if you're actually sketching in it, if you're writing in it, it can really be used for just about anything. And so it's also really fun to be like, hey, I sewed that together. I did that myself. So today I'm just going to give you some tools and tips on how to create what we like to call a stab bind. And so you saw the supply list, and for sure you need paper first and foremost. To get your paper started, as I start to go through the rest of the list, what I would suggest is if you have just like bond paper or even a craft paper, that works great as well. Or you can just tear directly from a sketchbook that you may have that you want to recycle. There's no right or wrong way to pick your paper. But the next thing that you're going to do is start to tear down your paper. So you'll see here that I took my sheet of paper and I actually tore it in half. And so just to like be my whole printmaker self, I'm just going to talk you through the process of tearing down paper, because a lot of times people will make it like crooked, if we want to say it that way. So just to kind of talk about it, bear with me because I'll be moving my camera back and forth a little bit. But to tear down a sheet of paper, what you're going to do is set it down on your surface. So you'll see I have like a little mat here, or even like if it's your countertop or your hardwood floor, whatever works best. But in order to tear this sheet in half, I know that it's about 12 inches, so I'm going to go at the 6 inches. 6. And the way to tear down a sheet of paper is to take the corner of your sheet of paper, tuck it against the ruler that you have, your straight edge, and then I like to call it like kind of a spider walk is what I tell my students. So I just spider walk my hand down on my ruler. That way I get a nice clean tear that's not going to be crooked. You never want your tear to be in front of your hand, just because that's when you might lose the pressure on your straight edge. So if you just take it and spider walk your hand down, you'll be able to get your sheet of paper. So now this gives me 2 sheets within my sketchbook. And so I encourage you to go ahead, as you get started, I usually try to tear down about 5 sheets. That way I have a nice 10-page sketchbook. So go ahead and start to do that as I kind of review the rest of the supplies that we'll be using. Tearing down your sheets of paper, it's a fun thing. Repetition, I like repetition. I think that's very clear with all of the art making that I do. So tear down your paper. The next thing that you're gonna need for your little toolkit that's just gonna help with, you know, there's no crying in baseball, so we try to make sure there's no crying in bookbinding as well. And so these are just small little things that I have around the house. A lot of people do tend to have them. So like binder clips, they're pretty great. They help hold your paper in place as you start walking through puncturing holes in the paper. The next thing is an owl. So AWL. There's my North accent that comes into play when I say that word. What it is it's a nice little needle point that works really well for puncturing through the paper. If you don't have this, something else that works, trusty metal dart from like the 70s, that works really well. You can get them, you can get different sizes of things. If all else fails, to be honest, I just get my drill bit out with the smallest bit and I just drill right through the paper. So you can kind of approach it in a couple different ways. It's totally up to you, but you'll need something to puncture through the paper is the main thing to think about. From there, the next thing that you'll need is a needle. So I try to use a little bit of a heavier weight needle when I do this, just because I want it to go through my paper. So you'll need a needle in order to stitch your pieces of paper together. And then the next thing you'll need is thread. And so I have a nice waxed thread. I actually just got, it's kind of fun. I just got like a kit of like 42 different colors of thread. Very exciting. But you can get it from Michael's, you can order it from different bookbinding places as well. Talus is one of my favorite. But what it is it's a flaxseed wax thread. So something that's waxed. If you don't have this, embroidery floss works. Also floss for flossing your teeth will work just fine as well. You can kind of just work with what you have at home. Again, there is no right or wrong way to do it. It's just all, I always think about things from a DIY culture up to a pristine bookbinding. So you can kind of think about your tools that way as well. You'll for sure need a pencil in order to mark stuff. I always try to have an eraser because sometimes I'm unsure of things, so I erase quite a bit. And then the other thing that you'll want is an extra sheet of paper that's the same size as your paper. And this is what's going to be our template in order to create our pattern that we'll be creating for our stabs with our puncturing our holes basically. So that's a good way to just get you started when you're thinking about bookbinding. And then last but not least, our found cover. So whether it is a brown paper bag or a cereal box, I'm recycling all of my old prints that I don't maybe like or couldn't find a purpose for them. So it's always that idea of like creation of materials, if that makes sense. So again, DIY culture up to something that's pristine. It's totally up to you. Like one of my favorite bookbinders last week, she did a whole class on the covers being Legos. I was like, that's fantastic. So you can really get crafty with it however you want to approach it. So you'll need your cover as well. The next thing that we're going to do is start to walk through creating our template. So again, like I said, you want it to be the same height. So here's my paper, my bind is gonna go this way, or it can go right here too. It's totally up to you. You're the artist, you're the creative person doing this, so you get to decide. So you want your template to be the same height and width as what you tore your paper down to. So for me, I am gonna go vertical for mine. And you'll see I have my sheet of paper here. That's really important. But something that I'm going to show you that's a fun little trick in case you don't have a ruler with you is that you can kind of create your own ruler for your template. So bear with me. I'm going to put my screen back down and we'll walk through what that looks like. So to kind of create my own ruler, I can take, again, it's the same paper that I'm using, same height and width, and I can fold this in half. And when you fold paper, I try to like to sit over the top of it. That way I can see that things are lining up perfect. And then I can take my hand and fold it that way. And so in bookbinding, we use bone folds. You'll see I have a couple different ones that I like to use. But also, like, if I don't have a fancy bone fold, what else can help me put weight on it? A spoon. Spoons work great. So I know you have spoons in your drawer, so you can always grab one of those too. And I just crease the edge, and then that way when I open it up, I know that that's the center point of my paper. Then I can create the ruler going that way as well. So I go from corner to corner, fold, open it up. So now I know I have two parts that are working really well. So again, this is just to help you create almost, it's a ruler essentially for your paper, and to understand exactly where the center points, the halfway points are going to be. And even from here, I can go in and fold again if I want to. So folding into the creases, lining everything up. Can't tell you how many times I've done this because no matter how nice of a ruler I have, for some reason, I always end up misplacing it. So this is just a nice little trick to show you how you can create this symmetrical balance when you start to create your template. So if you wanted to go ahead and finish folding some of those, this is a great way to help you find your center points when we start to puncture our holes and to make our template. So I think I'm going to stop there. That seems like a pretty good way. If anybody has any questions about that, please feel free to ask. Here to help however I can, or explain something slightly different if I have to. The next thing I'm going to do then is take my sheet of paper that is the same height as how I'm going to do my bind. And the best way that I like to think about it is that I like to create these little, I call them like guitar strings. So classically trained guitarist, so I try to put everything with everything to explain stuff. So you'll see here on the edge of my paper, because I'm going to be puncturing holes along the front spine of my book here. So on the front of it, closer to the spine, I'm going to create little lines on my sheet that are anywhere from 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch or 1/2 inch into my sheet of paper. And so once I have those little lines that are marked on that sheet of paper, again, whether it's using my ruler or just lining up my sheet this way and drawing a line, there is no right or wrong way to do it. Just go ahead and make sure that you create those lines. And now this is kind of the fun part, because this is where I get to decide how much I'm going to challenge myself with starting a new bind, or if I want to keep it simple and sweet. So it's totally up to you. So you can take your makeshift ruler that we made here. And what I like to do then is show that I created a center point. So I already have my fold here. So I'm actually going to put a little circle right there. So that's the start of me starting to create my pattern. The next thing is I have these other lines that show me that on either side, I can do another circle. So again, this is the start of it, and it shows me how far into my paper I'm going to be puncturing the holes. That way all of my paper will stay together. Well, I didn't fold these extra edges for no reason, so I might as well use those as well. So I can go into my guitar strings, line that up, and I think I'm gonna actually bring it back to that first string just so that it's not straight across. You don't have to keep like an odd or even amount of dots that you create. Just know that however much you challenge yourself is how you're gonna be stitching. So it's totally up to you as you get started. So I'm gonna actually just keep this one nice and simple. Keep it with 5 holes on this one. Again, it doesn't have to be an odd or even number of holes. It's totally up to you and how you do it. So from there, I'm ready to start with puncturing the holes in my paper. So something that I really like to do, you'll see that as you tore your paper that maybe it kind of gives you this feathered decal is what we call it in printmaking. People highly covet it. You either really like it or maybe you don't. It's totally up to you. If you don't like that, you can always use an x-acto blade to cut down your paper. No worries with that. But what I like to do is kind of tap out my paper as I get it going. That way I know that it's going to be nice and straight and I'm not going to have too many issues with it moving about. You're then going to want to take your cover of your booklet and fold it over the top. And so for my purposes, I do have about a ½ inch above and below if I want to, or you can tear down your cover to directly what your paper size is. Something else that's kind of fun with the cover too, you'll see here that I have this extra flap and this edge here. And so that means that I can kind of score the paper if I want, and it will fold into itself. So you'll fold it into your paper. So it acts as like almost a good bookmark and a good way to go about it. Again, they're just all of these different little things that you can do to take ownership and to be happy with your book and how you're going to create it. So you'll see I made my cover just a little bit larger, but you can tear it down to the size. It's totally up to you. For our purposes, I am going to just stab through my paper just so that it's a little more clear what I'm doing. So once I have my paper all straightened out and lined up with how I want it, the next thing I'm going to do is take my binder clip and I'm going to kind of give it a little bit of like a security piece of paper as well. So how I do that is, again, just take a little extra paper that you have, tear that down. And what I really like to do is have that security paper wrapped around just so that I'm not denting the paper from the binder clip. So I'll kind of tuck it around once I have this all straightened out. And then I take my binder clip and I'll clip it on there. Make sure that I'm still secure here. And then I take my other binder clip, again with a security sheet. You see a lot of my binder clips already have them, that one didn't. But with the security sheet, it really allows for me to, again, not dent my paper and kind of keep things a little bit more in order. So binder clips are attached. My paper is all locked down. And now I'm ready. My template is stacked with my paper that's been torn in half. The next thing I'm going to do is start to puncture my holes. So again, whatever you need to use in order to do this, again, from the DIY culture up to a pristine way of doing it, works. So do what will work best for you. When I'm starting to puncture my hole, I'm going to take my tool and you'll start to feel it really go through the paper. Sometimes I like to give it a little spin. Make sure when you're doing this that you're not doing it on your nice wooden table or something like that. Make sure you have maybe a little protector in the back, because you'll even see here mine's kind of stuck right now. But when I lift it up, I can start to see that my owl is going through my paper here. And that's exactly what you want, because you're going through that big stack of paper. You want to make sure that you're going through the whole thing. Otherwise, you're going to have to backtrack basically. So then sometimes I really like to go on the back side of my book and I'll puncture through that way, because then it really just opens up that hole and my needle's not going to get stuck and I'm not going to have issues with moving forward with it. So go ahead and do that. So I started at my center one. You can start anywhere you want on your template just to get you started. I try to start at the center and work my way up and then work my way down. And you'll see that that's not the first time I'm going to tell you about that as we get sewing. So go ahead and just start to puncture your holes on your template. You're going through your template, your stack of paper. Make sure that you're picking up your stack of paper, because remember, like right now, it is really nice and secure. It's not going to really go anywhere because I have my binder clips that are holding my paper together. Go ahead and just take a look on the back side and puncture through. Okay, ready to move on. You'll notice a lot of bookbinding. I think I really enjoy doing it for the most part because it allows for me to slow down as a human. Let's not lie, today's state is a little funky. Things are kind of strange. So anything that we can do to treat ourselves and give ourselves a moment to slow down, I think is quite a beautiful thing. So I got all of my holes punctured. I'm going to work my way back down the other part of the booklet that I'm making here. And again, your template can be as many dots as you want it to be. You can challenge yourself with all of the different, like if I wanted to do a zigzag, so I have a dot here and then a dot up here, dot here, here. Like you can totally do that. It's all about creating your own pattern. And so I encourage you to definitely do that if you want to. If you are a beginner stab binder, I do suggest just trying maybe a simple one first. And that's going to be the perfect hook that you'll need in order to get started. So try a simple one first, and then from there, I promise that you'll most likely get addicted to bookbinding like I am. All right, so I have all my holes punctured at this point. I made sure to pick up my packet to look on the back side, make sure I went all the way through. Because again, remember there's no crying in bookbinding, so there's nothing worse than getting everything put together and then finding out that you didn't puncture that last hole or all the way through the sheet of paper. The next thing that I'm going to do is take my template off of my stack of paper. So you may have your binder clips down. At this point, you're going to want to lift them up. And we're not removing the binder clips, but we're only removing this template because it doesn't serve us anymore. We don't really need it. What you're going to do is lightly lift up the pressure on your binder clip to pull out your template, and then put your clips back down because you'll need them to be in place in order to start stitching. Next thing I'm going to do is get my thread ready. So let's see, I think I have a nice black thread here, so it'll be crisp so that we can see what's happening. Usually when I do thread, depending on how many holes I have, I try to do an arm's length. So by that, I mean that I'll take my thread, unspool it, and try to do a full arm's length. So stretching out your arms. Also, we all need a little stretch right now because we were just hunching over, puncturing those holes. So stretch out and give your thread that you have a full arm's length. That'll be great for our purposes and how much we'll need. I try to do about 2 with each bind. So you'll do 2 measurements of stretching out your arms. That way you won't run out of thread, because there's nothing worse than starting to do a bind and then not giving yourself enough thread to do it. So just gonna get that ready. The next thing that you'll need in order to do this will be your needle. So again, I like to use a little bit of a thicker needle just because I think it helps with the sturdiness of it. So almost like a tapestry needle works really well. And then also you can use a curved needle. Those are some of my favorite to use. So again, tapestry needle works perfect. So when I'm threading my needle, I'm going to make a small little knot, not like a knot that we're used to. I'm going to put it through the thread. And I like to keep this little tail that I have right here. And how I'm going to do that is take my needle, I spin my needle like this, just give it a nice little spin. I take the needle and puncture it through the top of the thread that I have there. And then I pull down and it gives me this nice little sturdy knot that I have that then I won't lose this tail as I get going. So let me do that one more time, just so that we can walk through it together. I like doing it, but unthreading it's not the easiest. Bear with me. So again, I have my tail of my thread. I'm going to spin my needle and then take it and puncture it through the top and bring it down. And go ahead and tighten that because it gives you this nice little tie off. That way your little tail isn't going to go anywhere. So the next thing to do is to start. It's the most important thing. So I'm going to mark this just for myself. So on my little sheet, this is my front. So I put an F and then my back. And I always start in the middle hole. That's where our template ruler that we made showed us where the middle of my sheet of paper is. So I start in the middle hole on the back side. So again, just giving yourself these little extra tools because as you get going, you're going to be doing a repetitive action and you just don't want to get lost and like, oh man, did I decide that this was the front or the back? So just go ahead and mark that on that little sheet of paper for yourself. So I always start on the back, middle hole, and you're gonna pull your needle through. And then I always tie a little knot at the end here, just to give myself on the back side, just to give myself that little extra so that I have my thread, I know how long it's gonna be, and I'm good to go because this will be where I'm ending my bind as I get going. So now as the artist, you have a couple different options. The reason that I do stab binds and I like stab binds is because I like to loop it over the top of the spine. So you have an option of either taking your needle and just going to the next hole that you see. So I usually work from the right and then the left. So I work my way down the spine and then up the spine. But you can either go to that next hole or you can take your thread, loop it around. Again, this is why I like stab binds because it gives me that little extra, I don't know, it just looks beautiful. I think that's the best way to describe it. So then I go back through that hole, pull my thread, and there we go. So that's the beginning of my stab bind. As you can see, I wrapped it around. That was my decision instead of moving on to the next hole here. The next thing is, again, we're working our way up and then working our way back down. One of the best tips that I ever visually started to like figure out when it comes to stab binds. So right now my needle is on the front. I just went to the next hole, pulling it through. Sometimes if it seems like it's a little bit of a struggle to get your needle through, don't be afraid to have a needle nose pliers. That's something that I do have in my toolkit as well, just a little thing. So now I created this line and I'd like to loop back over. So I'm going to take my thread that's on the back, loop it over because I want to stay consistent with what I did here. The best thing that I can think about as I get going is that the front and the back are going to be opposites of each other. And it's great to understand that. The sooner you understand that, the easier stab binding is going to be. And what I mean by that is, so right now I have this straight line on my front part, but on the back, it's missing. And that's missing because as I work my way back down to go to the other side, I'm going to fill in those lines. So it's really you just understanding that they're going to be opposites of each other, and it helps you keep that consistency with your pattern that you're thinking of. So again, I have this straight line on the front. I don't have it on the back yet, but I know that I'll be making it as I work my way back down the spine here. So right now, my needle's on the back side. I'm going to go straight across to my next hole. Pulling it through. And here's another good example. I don't have a straight line here, but I have a straight line back here. And again, they're just opposites of each other. So don't panic, you're not doing anything wrong. Just the sooner you recognize that they're gonna be opposites, the quicker you're gonna decide on your pattern and you're gonna get going. So I've kind of met the end here of my, as I work my way back down. Again, I just did a simple little bind just so that we can talk through and walk through the process of what it looks like to make a template. But so I have an option here of either looping it back through so that it wraps around, or I can even wrap it around the bottom part if I want. It's totally up to you as the artist. So if I wrap it around here, it's going to be on the back side. I come through here and then I fill in that signature that I have from right here. Or I can just start working my way back down. So for me, I'm going to wrap it around again. Again, it's the beautiful thing about stab binds is that you start to see this pattern that shows you along the spine. So I'm gonna wrap it around, go back through the same hole. All right, and now I'm ready to work my way back down the spine. So connecting and going through that hole. Another big tip that I wanna give you is, and don't be too hard on yourself if this is your first or second or third one, is you never double up on your thread. So like I should never have like 2 lines of thread going through here. That means I messed up on my pattern somewhere along the way. But this is again the good example of showing you how I had that on the back. Now I have it on the front, and now it's time to close it right over this way. So go back through that center point. You'll go through the same hole multiple times. You just should never be doubling up on thread, basically. So I know that I'm trucking along, doing good here because my back is my front. So that part of it is good. So now I work my way back down the other part of the spine. And so depending on if you're right or left-handed, whatever one's dominant, you can flip your book so that you'll be comfortable working through it. So I'm going to, again, repeat and do the same pattern that I did before. Loop my thread around the spine, go through the same hole. And while I'm doing this, I'm breathing, I'm enjoying that I'm giving myself permission to slow down for the afternoon, enjoying Unglued Craft Fest virtual. Hoping that next year we'll all be together again. Acknowledging my pattern that I did. Repetition. Can you all tell I really like repetition? So puncturing through that. Not panicking because I don't see the line on the front yet. now. Loop back through. Not doubling up on my thread. Looking at the front and the back. And so I hope you can kind of see it. Again, I know I did a simple one just to kind of get us started and so that we could walk through these little tips and tricks as you get going. But I hope you can kind of tell, like, hey, if I wanted to start doing a zigzag, that sounds like a lot of fun. And you can do that with the pattern that you created with that. So going back through. All right, so here I have my front and my back that are matching, or my front and my back because I have them marked. And then the last thing to do is to tie off and cut your thread. So when I'm looking at this, what I can do is create another little knot that's close, hugs around the bind. All right, and then from here, I can make the decision as the artist if I want to have the tail of my string or if I want to cut it really close to the bind. It's totally up to you. So that is a quick little run through of how to do a little stab bind booklet. Once you're done, go ahead and take your binder clips off. And you're ready to start writing your grocery list in it, or even making the list of all of the makers that you want to check in on their virtual website. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask and let me know. Here to help however I can.
That was wonderful. I really appreciated all of your, like, the vibe of like, just chill, like we're gonna stretch it out a little bit next. We just need these types of things this year.
Bookbinding is like, if you hunch over too much, it's like, come on, man, give yourself some, gotta stretch out. Yeah. Let yourself slow down, make your own sketchbook. I mean, I do it just solely for the purpose of like intention books. It's that kind of year, man. We gotta do it. Take care of yourself.
Yes, totally. Do you have any classes coming up at the Plainsart Museum that that people could be a part of?
Sure. So we do have a couple virtual classes that'll be happening. There's one next week. It's an oil pastel class with Megan Larson, who lives in Philadelphia, actually. So again, the beauty of our whole virtual platform is that we can have artists outside help us teach. So we have an oil pastel class coming up. We have Megan Johnson, who's a high school art teacher. She'll be doing a watercolor class and also an illustration class. You can find all of the virtual classes on our website at plainsart.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. Everybody take care. Make all the books. If you have any questions, I'm here to help however I can. You know where I work.
Yeah.